Resolve the United States Federal Commission should amend the Bayh-Dole Act to exclude nanotechnology-related materials and concept of inherency. One is the Bayh-Dole Act was passed in 1980 includes unrestrictions on the ability to retain federal or ownership of federally funded inventions. Second is that Bayh-Dole ensures institutions own their own inventions over contractual obligation to government funding. The third argument is that nanotech is a swiftly growing industry in the status quo that alters the nanometer to be able to create new forms of material. It's most notably used in medicine, energy, and biomedicine. Thus, the plan is the res. The USFG should amend the Bayh-Dole Act to exclude nanotechnology or nano-related materials concepts. Cool.
Is your position that this would increase the production of nanotechnology?
Yeah, that'll be yes.
You increase the production of nanotechnology.
Yep. Solvency. One is that Congress has Congress obviously the authority to implement that. The second argument is that exchange of the Bayh-Dole makes publicly owned and non-exchange licensing of nanotechnology advantage. One is health. Its uniqueness is that Bayh-Dole is limiting nanotech health and research in the status quo. One is that it incentivizing hoarding away from the public use of it and distribution through institutions who maintain full ownership over the patents of nano distribution. The second argument is that also a recent study by Tedman said that 13 out of 14 recent patents were selling significantly higher in the United States than in other areas. The third argument is an example of Renova, which is a federally funded HIV medicine that was produced. A patent is extremely expensive in the United States. It's over 10 times more expensive in the United States than in Japan and 4 times more expensive than it is in Canada because of the patent materials. It's also one of the top 25 most expensive medicines in the world. Solvency is the plan is a massive decrease in the cost of nanomedicine. One is the massive boost in production. The plan opens up the ability for access to patents for manufacturing firms to be able to sell, which decreases a massive flow in the market, decreases the price, leads to there's already 4 companies invested in interested in investment right now, and the status quo suggests they would all purchase it. The second argument is that it sets a precedent. The plan sets a precedent that the United States won't fund closed patent public research anymore. The public funds go directly to public goods. The third argument is that it leads to an outside investment in the United States, a massive opening of the United States market. Nano research will lead to a global investment in the United States market impacts. There are a few. The first is that Renova specific medicine is an example of being able to save hundreds of lives. According to Scientific American, income is the number one factor in what decides who has access to affordable medicine for things like HIV drugs. If it is extremely more likely for people with extraordinary wealth to be able to afford purchasing drugs to be able to push off HIV, which means that multiple people left on the periphery will be able to die, creates systemic impacts in which the impoverished are the ones that the impoverished are left to die, and only the privileged are allowed to live. The second one is also as the future drugs, the future markets are already increased on a massive increase in the plan. It means that there's easier access to medicine. It means that we can solve future diseases that would be able to count for saving millions of people's lives. Advantage to is innovation. Uniqueness that the Bayh-Dole Act leads to barriers and is a barrier on nanotech innovation in the status quo. One is patent thickets. Little a is that university owns blanket patents without doing any research in the status quo. An example of this is there's a single watt carbon nanotube that has over 1,600 patents on it, which means you can't do any type of research in it without violating the patent right, because there's blanket patent thickets. Means that they're vague and extremely overlapping, but they still serve as a barrier to all types of research. The B argument is that it makes it impossible for innovation because of risk a lawsuit because the patents are so wide-reaching. The C argument is that yeah, what's up? This is the last one.
So what's the time frame for when these HIV drugs will be developed, and how does that decrease the price of the actual nanomaterials?
They're already developed. They're just hoarding them right now because they have
patents. It's a question of distribution.
Was this the second part of the question? How does it
decrease? No, you only got.
That's okay.
The C argument is that nanotech field is new and technical, so multiple patents, so there's multiple patents on the same product, and they all overlap. It means that they describe the different products in different ways, but the same patent is used for all of them, which means one patent can literally cut off millions of different types of research. The second argument is that there's patents on building blocks that inhibit development. They're susceptible to lawsuits, even if it's a totally new type of thing, because they use the same base structure of nano development. The third argument is that barriers harm the industry as a whole. It serves even a series of minor improvements. There's only a series of minor improvements rather than huge innovation improvements. For example, you never get to create an idea entirely on its own. A good example of this is Intel, who has a patent literally has one patent that covers all nano research for anything under 50 nanometers. Like one patent, all research under 50 nanometers. Pretty nuts. Solvency. One is that the plan allows for open licensing, means that small businesses and innovations have the access to building blocks to be able to create new types of technology. The second argument is the plan clarifies the patent confusion because they no longer exist in the first place. The third argument is the plan creates focus, bringing the issue of innovation to the attention of investors. China, for example, China, whose open source technology, has massive developments in technology and that's what the fourth argument is the plan also reverses the fear of lawsuits because no longer have to worry about, or they're more willing to invest in projects they don't have to worry about being sued in the long run. We have a few impacts. First is nuclear waste. Is nuclear waste. A little later, this is that swarm robots or mini nanorobots that will be able to clean up nuclear waste sites. For example, in places like Yucca Mountain, which in the United States has dumped the entirety of its decommissioned nuclear arsenal onto Native American land, means it's literally threatens the population, and was waste from nuclear radioactive material kills millions or kills hundreds of thousands of people. The argument is also solves for nuclear accidents and nanobubbles to be able to put in fuel rods to isolate nuclear reactors from other materials, means that the process of fission becomes extremely more safe. This is a good thing because it means to prevent future Fukushimas in the future, in which hundreds of thousands of people become exposed to toxic radioactive waste from the meltdowns. The second mark is also key to energy development. Later, this is the nanotechnology. Nanotech solar cells are in the status quo are not that efficient and not cost efficient because they only have to convert 40 to 50% of sunlight versus new nanotechnology cells would be able to claim 90% of solar energy necessary to solve warming. According to the recent MIT study, warming is 5 times faster now than in the last 50 years. Means that inevitable acidification kills phytoplankton-based structure of all food systems. Means that entire ecosystem collapse causes extinction. Also, other impacts like climate ravens, decrease mountain ice cap means waters rise. Means people on different islands have to be relocated and eliminates entire cultures and extremely dehumanizing.
Three off solvency advantages.
Okay, I like my alternatives and separate sheets of paper.
No. And Corey, do you have a separate sheet for the solvency page?
No, I have solvency and advantage one on the same page.
Okay, that's fine. And John's, how do you have it? Do you have it in a similar time? Straight down? Right on. Everybody ready? Whitman?
Yes, thank you.
First off, the military disadvantage is one of the concern developing nano weapons, stocking status quo right now. The Department of Defense research is halted due to new types of patent fear over new types of licensing programs over commercial licensing. Additionally, the government will only develop these new types of patents if they have patents because they understand the public viability means that independently the public would be able to be aware of the way the DoD is developing new type of nano weapons. The beast once the patents would immediately lead to new types of nano weapons. The first argument is to the baseline patent development means independently the AF can give a patent to the military, create accessibility controls over new types of handling the weapons. Arguments is independently this means the military has an incentive to be able to hide away the patents from the public and guarantee new types of outsourcing. This is also proven via the way the DoD contracted the new type of patent over the H1N1 virus and airborne it, and made it the airborne virus to be able to use the new type of wartime virus. And second argument is exclusive patent powers means independently that the type of patent power when you have the logic of manipulation in the Manhattan Project means independently they have a monopoly over the new type of patents. And the third argument is they develop new types of second generation technology in a world in which they transfer new types of nano weapons into a technology that is not accessible to the public because they think the advancement of the research is inadequate for the public sphere. Additionally, the next argument is the government would use these nano weapons specifically into a new development of nano weapons. In fact, the H1N1 example we least below is a reason that's why the DoD has that investment. The fifth argument is disallows for a specific type of weapon development. Arguments is independently this career would stamp out the classified status linked to patents. The government would continue with the secrecy away from the public. The next argument is nano weapons would lead to international arms race scenarios. The first argument is it causes new types of development and understanding. That means a miscalculated scenario absent the Trilateral Commission on Nanotechnology automatically creates no perception that the United States asymmetrically increases its arms against other nations. Arguments is independently that creates a scenario for new types of conflict escalation. You can extend the arguments. That's why that will lead to millions of deaths. Additionally, that leads to new types of sanction level scenarios where we cannot understand the way that other nations continue to contrive against. This means we would never be able to reorder the military safety. What?
Like, what's the thesis of this argument? Is it when we have open source patents, we have nanotechnology that leads to nanoweapons?
No, the DoD can't invest in these nanoweapons as of right now because they fear that because the public knows about them, they wouldn't be able to do it. That means the plan gives the government exclusive access over the patents, and the DoD can simply hide them from the public. Safety disadvantage.
Okay.
The export is needed to start nanotech development is safe as of right now. The first argument is 6% of all nano development earmarked within the United States has been earmarked for new types of health and safety measures. The second argument is by new types of beta procedures, increase new types of private partnerships specifically for health and safety means. The very development of the United States, the College of Nano-Scale Science and Engineering has already devoted new types of safety procedures within universities as a baseline standard to be able to have new types of safety development. The third argument is beta uniquely increases scientific mechanisms to be able to solve it for its patents and protects the patent because it understands the way that the patent can be shifted through new types of operations means the licenses that happens to be in the university are comparatively safer than the government. The fourth argument is Beidel creates a competitive environment specifically for discovering new types of scientific discoveries. That means free access to all other patents, arguments, independently. Universities are absolutely necessary better because the way that they write their licenses makes it more clear the safety concerns of each patent rather than the government that legally is, which has an incentive to hide it from the public. The beast one, or the fifth argument is turd. There is no reason to seek safety flaws whenever the patents are not exclusive, specifically when the government owns them and they're not exclusive rights. They would no longer seek new types of safety protocols because the university would just ship new types of patents. Additionally, the beast one's links the first argument's plan would increase new types of unsafe nanotechnology. Suiting the government-owned patents would mean a new type of switch to non-exclusive patents means the public does not have an incentive to increase their public-private partnerships, specifically in the safety concerns that have already been established on the baseline university level. The government reauthorized that, which is why let's race to the bottom of safety. The second argument is universities ignore the safety concerns without the patents because they don't feel like they can have applied science directives anymore. It means that the baselines go to the wayside and they would develop new type of technology. The third argument is the government can classify its patents its own, which means independently safety needs transparency. The government would just classify them to a realm that the public would be able to keep up. Means safety is absolutely relevant because safety relies on new types of public transparency. The fourth argument is the university would lose all types of revenue arguments. So scientists would immediately have an incentive to not be able to compete with the applied sciences directed to universities anymore because the government is outcompeted them. C1 safety is absolutely critical to continuing nanotechnology development within the United States. Understanding the way that we make national requirements is the only way to compete with international actors, specifically the National Nanotech Initiative and the cooperation of the Trilateral Nanotech Agreement means that is the only way to build new types of nanotechnology. These ones just turns the entirety of the app. You can send the argument test why millions of people die without nanotechnology. Additionally, it is completely worse because unsafe nanotechnology leads to new type of extinction scenarios of entire universe. New types of diseases and lack of adaptability to the disease means it fundamentally alters the human genome in a way that we cannot prepare for, and patents. Just add. The export is international harmonization of international property as occurring as right now. The Trilateral Patent Office does 9 out of all 10 patents that occur within the United States. This includes a cooperation with Japan and Europe. The beast one of the plan is a new type of unilateral change, which means they would no longer cooperate with them. Changes in unilateral procedure means science and technology is absolutely critical. Only the United States they would not cooperate with the Trilateral Convention anymore. This signals a flip-flop in the United States federal government policy after the creation of the Trilateral Agreement means that other nations have accepted the backlash against the United States. Cease one is unilateral change means that it collapses the Trilateral Patent Office. The perception of government new types of patent grabbing companies are race to the bottom to use the patent development. Additionally, other countries would secure their patents against the United States means the lack of development of new types of nanotechnology independently turns the app. Additionally, decent point is patent cooperation is absolutely necessary to solve afforestation because it allows inter cooperation of disease and understands the way that independently 1.8 million individuals dying of HIV and the extent of the case impacts independently. New types of trilateral agreements are absolutely necessary to be able to solve that for the way that the collapse would go global because only a transparency agreement on the international sphere would be able to solve that for the way that we understand lack of miscalculated behaviors. We have we get rid of the fog of war because we don't understand miscalculated behaviors and solvency. This applies to the advantages. The eighth one is the unique circumstance nanotechnology research and development is increasing in the status quo. We have several arguments. The first argument is patents rise have already been witnessed in the United States. In fact, patents were 1,400 in 2009, 2,700 in 2010. Additionally, there were 3,400 in 2011 and 4,000 in 2012. The second argument is the President's 2013 National Nanotech Initiative increased $1.8 billion for new types of nanotech development within the United States. That totals to $18 billion going on already in the status quo. The third argument is the nanotech demand is expected to increase $3.1 trillion by 2015 according to independent research initiatives by the Trilateral Commission. The fourth argument is the nanotech demand is expected to grow 19% by 2014 by the Trilateral Commission. The fifth argument is independently the world demand is expected to increase 2 times by to 5.5 billion new types of development within the status quo means independently there's inevitable demand. The sixth argument is 80,000 new nanotechnology employees have been added to the United States economy alone. The beast one is nanotechnology is absolutely inevitable. The first argument is nanotechnology is the most affordable way and effective way to provide new types of goods means the market will inevitably be able to shift to that. Second argument is the world is already developing. Japan invested 250 million, EU invested 1 billion, and the UK invested 45 million. Additionally, third argument is 800 manufacturers throughout the world are already developing these types of nanotech resources. The sixth point is the terms. The first argument is Beijing is actually absolutely necessary to the development of public-private partnerships because it understands the way that the public can relate to the way the universities continue to orient the status quo means that eventually the government have an incentive to disguise that from the public and decrease the investment that is already going on. The second argument is Beidel increases overall businesses. In fact, it has been witnessed within the United States that over 500 new companies of nanotechnology have been developed after universities maintain the patents means there is no fear of lawsuits going on in the status quo. The third argument is international development. Either the patents is set and true, there will be no cooperation after the plan, or the plan proves because the there are new types of international patent governing mean that other nations have an incentive just to decrease it. The decent point is government control is bad. The first argument is turn the plan to move the incentive to have new types of public-private partnerships and accessible because the incentive is all accessible as of right now. The government would just make it accessible to everyone, which actually decreases and stifles the market because there is no competitive advantage to be able to compete against an industry within the United States. The second argument is turn the government does not have the resources to be able to market their inventions. Even if they have an ability to trade their inventions, they can't market them to the public because the patents would not be as viable. Additionally, the third argument is turn the government rules and regulations cause a patent backlash because they have many types of logging and a fear of legalese means that because the DoD is inherently going to get involved in argument says independently cause a new type of backlog, they would not be able to solve that for the massive increase in patents because they don't have the infrastructure in the status quo. The fourth argument is turn no patent development specifically because there's no patent transfer. That would actually hurt the market competitively better because the government doesn't allow a transfer of individuals, i.e. one company working on it and then transfer to another company for a fee, which means independently you actually stifle the market. The fifth argument is B&D actually leads to new types of intervention in the market because it understands the government regulations will continually increase and new type of uncertainty within the market. Businesses would never be able to leverage their business partners within the United States. Additionally, the eighth point is universities absolutely critical. The first argument is B&D has increased funding specifically within universities and applied sciences have increased over 90% within United States universities because of the creation of Big Dole, which means the safe technology of nanotechnology only happens in the world of the status quo. The second argument is they would not be able to solve that for any of the plan because they would simply change their patents to label a different field, which means they would just call it military development. That means the government has a hands-off approach to it. And the next argument is turn you actually, the research would actually continue with less safety because they don't have the infrastructure to continue safe as right now. They have to build that up over time.
Yes. So I'm going to do the case in order. And then I'm going to go to all this insolvency stuff. So the insolvency stuff will come after advanced right advantage to you. And then military, safety, and international cooperation.
Advantage to solvency, military, safety, patents?
Yep, I think that sounds right. And as always, if I'm being unclear, please let me know. Okay. Over to the affirmative, try or die stop for millions of deaths from AIDS as well as a massive nuclear meltdown that can kill millions of people or global warming status quo. The negative does not offer any sort of alternative mechanism to solve for things like global warming or AIDS means tried out for the planet to across the entirety of advantage one that solves for millions and millions of deaths from AIDS, but also the cyclical dehumanization that happens when corporations can decide who lives and who dies next to go to across the entirety uniqueness and global the impact level says global warming is coming status quo. This is not refuted, means try or die for all out of extinction. They're conceding a lot of arguments to say that none of that nanotechnology is happening in status quo. Specifically, the argument number 3 that says that there's just a series of minor improvements which will take out a lot of their solve these questions because yes, there are new patents coming up. Those are only process patents. Thickets or in the process of minor innovations. These tiny innovations that are happening without any sort of new technology because they're actually still in barriers. They say they'll get that more on solve this question. Go to the solvency now. Your consequences are research development status quo that patents are increasing. This jives with our unique seriously. Yes, patents are on the increase in status quo, but it's not the right kind of patents that we need. What we need is an innovation only solving through the real world. The claims said that $1.8 billion that Obama led. This is going to be an important argument because it indicates that in the budget in the status quo, there is money for private innovation. The plan does not preclude private innovation or private patents, it just makes them open source. There's no reason why that money would transfer over to a government development means it still has to come from the private sector. You see it's massive, what?
The only thing is, all their patent stuff and increased funding proves our unique. It's only a question of distribution.
Yes. Only all of your arguments prove our unique. It's only a question of distribution. It will take out the entirety of your impact level. Consistent nanotechnology is inevitable. You say that nanotechnology and innovation is efficient. That is inevitable. That's not the impact level. Your first reason for private-public distinction. You said the partnership would look like the government is disguising them, but we would say that is not true. First of all, the government has capacity. The government has capacity to do a walk-in on a patent in the status quo. They should never operate that right, which means that all of these patents are currently living in fear of government walking in to steal from military technology. The government already has the capacity to do what you're talking about. What you're talking about disadvantage one. It's just a question of whether the rest of private companies have the capability to get those patents to increase innovation or given you said that there's increase in business. There are new companies in status quo. There may be new companies in status quo. First of all, those are all owned by mega corporations, and second of all, they are still living in fear of lawsuits, which means they're just doing something that's profitable without actually helping people through innovation. Go to the impact level. They say government control is bad. Government control is bad. Obviously, we uncontrolled. The Bay-Doyle Act is government control. That's the thesis of these impact terms. We remove the government control and make it a free market for patent development. You're not sure because the government doesn't have research to do inventions. Also already cross-applied there. You're going to about $1.8 billion going to public sector means that we don't have capacity to do that. You said the DOT is going to get involved. First of all, the DOT has capacity to just do nanotechnology development and secret in the status quo. No reason why they have to tell the public about it. Not covered by the Bay Doyle Act. You're using intervention leads to more government regulations. This is literally the opposite of our plan. Our plan decreases government intervention in the world patent. Two next universities are critical. You say the cause of safety. Nanotech. I'll answer that on the safety. All of these are just about the safety design. I'll get to that soon. Is that good?
Yep.
Okay. On military. First argument is DOT is developing nanotechnology in the status quo. They have closed source patents on 300 different types of nanotechnology between the private the public market can't using that nanotechnology in the status quo, but they already have a lot that are increasing military technology. Next argument is no. Like obviously the DOT can already do things like this in private Europe. The impacts indicate that we should not trust government for things like this. No reason why we should trust the fact that they don't have nanotechnology in the status quo. You say linked to monopoly patents, not true. Cross-player analysis, but $1.8 billion going to public sector seems to indicate there could not be a monopoly. Also the budget finding within the Congress and Congress Senate Obama indicates that they will not increase the budget for the DOD for things like nanotechnology. They already should have done the budget of defense military by 50% needs to be that means that the free market is obviously the place where a plane will erupt. You say that leads to miscalculation does not happen. We have systems like PALs, etc. Nanoweapons would also have security systems. Also, nanoweapons are probably about 15 years off. You have to literally build billions of a specific type of particle. What we're working on right now is medicine and things like that. There's no analysis that to have nanoweapons actually appear out of nowhere. If they go for this argument about how it creates illnesses, we also are creating the vaccines for those illnesses. So nanotech, in effect, solves for nanoweapons, right? Because we create the cure through nanotechnology to solve the nanoweapon.
Question?
Yes, one.
Does that mean you think it's a good thing for the DoD to be able to create diseases and the vaccines for those diseases?
No, we think it's a good thing for the DoD to be able to create vaccines to protect against what I'm about to get to, which is the inevitable development of nanotechnology by non-state actors. Go to safety now. Good job down the bottom level. Our argument is unsafe practices for nanotechnology is inevitable status quo. Not only things like nanoweapons come from the non-state actors, but also the innovation in the rest of the world. Cross-apply their massive cooperation status quo, but also places like China and Indonesia in the rest of the world are doing massive innovation, or trying to get innovation in nanotechnology means that there is already unsafe practices because none of them have the same standards in the status quo means to try or die to invent the nanotechnology or quote-unquote the blue goo that can be able to combat things like a great group that's created situations of non-safe technology. Next argument is that you say that universities are more safe. The first argument is that they rely on government funding for their programs. 90% of the profit of nanotechnology development at universities doesn't come from selling the patent, but it comes from the government supplying them money. It means that they would obviously adhere with government standards for safety, which we do have in the status quo over nanotechnology. Next Obama has asked 18 different people on a special committee looked into nanotechnology safety standards since he wants to get some nanotechnology safety standards passed by 2013 indication that there will be safety standards even if there's in the status quo. The third argument is that the government has the capability to be just as safe as universities. The next argument is term probably make universities safer by allowing them to be open source, means we have checks on their patents and the possible things they can be used for. The next argument is that we don't actually because we don't actually increase government funding for their own nanotechnology. Means that any of the non-safe things that would happening in government development wouldn't happen in all of our plan. You good, Mitch? The third decide. First argument is no cooperation on nanotechnology in status quo for a couple reasons. First is that his name is Bruce Alsha. He said that the nitrogen power won't be with nanotechnology between China and the United States, even if there's cooperation on a small scale between places like Japan, etc. There's no cooperation on a large scale between the two actors. The next argument is to turn our plan obviously increase the information dissemination between China and the United States, but also information dissemination between the patent cooperation and status quo. Our argument is that what would happen in a world where we have unsecure patents is not that it would collapse. It would not cause us to look like flip-floppers. Instead, it would look like we are actually innovating for the betterment of the world. The rest of the world. Also, Japan has open source patents. That is an argument pulled from the uniqueness on Advantage 1 that says Japan's written veneer costs 10 times less. So the HIV medicine costs 10 times less.
Who has crazy patents.
Yeah. And the United States is the only one doesn't have open source passing in status quo. Even people within the cooperative patents go to enter impact level. No reason why the cooperative has capacity to solve for extinction. We say without the United States infrastructure innovation, no capacity for us to solve for the problems of Advantage 1. Get rid of the fog of war. Do you want anything else on this? Where do you want everything else? I have 30 seconds.
I think that the only thing that would lead to this fog of war would be that, like, the United States hoarding patents.
Right.
And
The thesis of this is that the United States looks like they're hoarding patents in the status quo. The next argument is that it doesn't cause a perception of flip flopping because people within the House have been talking about doing the plan for a number of years because they don't think that closed source patents are the best for economic development or for saving millions of lives like Evangeline is.
Going to be case straight down.
Okay. So that's solvency stuff on top.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it begins at our overview, goes straight
Got
down
it.
my line. From the patents to say,
Sorry, which one?
That's the third one.
Okay.
the safety to set and military to set.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because it's all on top.
One more time.
Yeah, of course. Case, straight down the order. The safety to set. The patents to set.
Right now, safety before patents.
Yeah. Safety, patents, and military. Quick explanation of how Bayh-Dole works. The plan event would inevitably lead to where that universities no longer control patents, they go to the government, they claim it's open source, we'll read reasons why it doesn't and why universities will be a better option. Just a clarification at the top, now the links. Brandis is tried. I know it's us. SIU was able to solve the plan. We're giving several reasons why giving it to the government is going to actually lead to the worst forms of nanotech development. There are two links where you can see. The first is it decreases investment. Industries will perceive as if more government regulation is going to pursue in the future. Even if the government says, hey, we're now going to own the patents to be able to give to nanotech, this does not guarantee that businesses will perceive it like that. We made the argument that businesses will perceive that there will be a spillover in regulations, which is something that goes perceived. That snowball regulations means you attack the ability for there to actually be any investment in nanotechnology. That turns the entirety of the affirmative for two reasons. One, it decreases the amount of safety because if no one actually puts money in it, then we're actually going to get the worst technology. The second argument is increases the ability for us to actually able to share that with other countries. Our argument is that guarantees that other countries will want to backlash against us, which causes extinction. They say dehumanization through corporations. You don't have an impact to this in the DMC. Our argument is the government's worse, which is what we're going to explain because we're going to give reasons why the government will selectively choose to classify certain ones because they want to use it for nanotech weapons. Our H1N1 analysis is devastating on this question. Indicates that they would use things like dispersal mechanisms, which is something that they say wouldn't happen, but they concede the warrants. Why would? They say the only thing that blocking is minor improvements are the status quo, which is the reason why they're bad. Our argument is that minor improvements are not what's happening in the status quo. We have several reasons why investment is linked to safety. First of all, extend across our first argument, which indicate that 1,400 patents are happening in the status quo, happening in 2010. The other argument I want to extend across here is that demand will only increase in the future, $3 trillion. Now the plan is actually going to deter this investment for a couple reasons. One is extend across our argument why companies are actually adamantly opposed to government actually getting these things. A couple reasons. First, that it means that there's no longer competition between universities. Currently in the status quo, the only thing that's making it safe is that MIT has to compete with a place like Stony Brook University. But and moreover, those universities no longer have to compete, and the government gets the open source patent. They don't have no incentive to actually go into the lab and make things more innovations. They've also conceded our second argument, which means that it's actually good for businesses. That's with university to status quo because it actually maintains the patents are cheap, which is something that the government has an incentive to jack up the price in the future, which means they won't be able to solve. The third argument here is pretty devastating. It indicates that the plan would be perceived as patent grabbing. They based the assumption that they are perceived as open source. They've lost the perception link, which is that the government looks like they're patent grabbing. Nothing per the plan text means. The government says, yo, it's open source now. People think it's bad. Moreover, they say it just means that they try to say that somehow private funding is happening in the status quo. We have three arguments. Does they assume the plan, which indicates that they'll actually tank it and it makes it unclear. They say distribution. We say that the status quo will be able to solve. They say the government is able to walk in now. We say that Bayh-Dole actually forbids that because the government cannot access their patents, which is why it was written in the first place. The plan only increases that they offer the classification of this happen. They say lawsuits, no impacts lawsuits. We say that's inevitable, non-indicative. Our negative arguments indicate that it's actually increasing the status quo. They say Bayh-Dole equals government control. This is blatantly false arguments that Bayh-Dole was actually like when saying about government control, which is something that could have been read read from the Wikipedia article. Moreover, they say DoD can do it now. Our argument is that this is not relevant to the argument that we're not going to go for that. Instead, they say the plan decreases intervention. Our argument is that no, it doesn't increases that intervention. You can extend across our backlog. They said that goes conceded. They conceded that in the world in which the government has to get these patents in open source, there would actually be a massive backlog because they don't have the infrastructure to deal with that in status quo. The impact of that as time frame indicates that in what a backlog, the government just abandons this and no innovation. They say there's no patents transfer. Our argument is that yes, there is. The government would now put it so that they actually have to give it to someone within the literacy. They say the least new government regulations are actually that's our argument. Okay. They also concede the argument that at least the new government regulations have decreased businesses, something they conceded. Safe to say. We're going to concede the argument that at least non-state actors is the reason why you don't solve your affirmative the first standard world, and which we give it to the open source methodology that makes it easier for non-state actors to be able to get that technology and status quo. Arguments that only leads to a world in which no first strike against the U.S. These asymmetric warfare and impacts. No, you can see this is devastating for them because it proves they also don't solve any of the affirmative because non-state actors are able to get it. And it doesn't matter how much innovation you get because they're just able to redesign those drugs and the status quo to make them genetically make it so that they don't have a cure to them, which means inevitably leads to a strike on the United States causes extinction. Moreover, we're going to concede the argument they also Blue Girls would not be able to solve this argument. Moreover, you conceded that non-state would get it because we wouldn't be able to rapidly increase the amount of development we have in the world where the government would just stifle innovation. It goes to the pants instead. They get here too late. There's not much that's relevant to this debate. They say there's no cooperation happening in the status quo. This is not indicative of our uniqueness arguments indicating that the United States currently works with Japan and in Europe in 9 out of 10 of all patents, and they all have to do with science and technology. Our argument that this means that even if your Bruce argument says that there's no cooperation with China, it's not relevant to our dissent, which is based off this trilateral patent office. Moreover, they say the plan increases info dissemination. We give 3 reasons why it wouldn't be perceived like that. The first is that U.S. unilateral action has not happened since the Bayh-Dole Act was actually put into Congress, which means other countries would have expected that it would have had some sort of consultation. The fact that the plan is not means it's perceived as a slap in the face to current innovation. The second argument here is devastating and indicates that actually nanotechnology is specifically key because other countries fear that if anyone goes patent grabbing that they'll get a huge increase in innovation. Also, the flip-flopping argument would occur. You see the House talked about it, I call BS. The House never talked about nanotechnology. The cons of patents. Our argument is that it will uniquely lead to other countries have to lead to isolation. Moreover, you can see the other warrants in this argument indicates that other countries, even if the United States does open source, other countries would actually revert, which solves back your Japan argument.
Europe won't want to cooperate with the United States because they want to make money off the patents.
And Europe want to cooperate with the United States because they want to make money off the patents, which means you give them a market incentive to why they actually have to go into isolation, which was our impact scenario. They say U.S. infrastructure will be able to solve the fact war. It doesn't happen. Our argument is that decreases the ability for investors to be able to actually put money in there, which means they won't perceive it actually making money. They also concede that at least a race to the bottom because in world patent grabbing, the countries would try to spur out as many patents as they want that it actually would make them unsafe in the future. That's conceded they can't go for anything in the PMR. Never answer our race to the bottom argument. The impact is devastating towards the entirety affirmative. You can see that only world of cooperation wouldn't be able to solve for the massive amounts of HIV scenario. Also leads to a world of miscalculation. You have war arguments, not a miscalculation argument, which means they empirically give a reason why they would have to backlash against the United States, which is the reason why that a war will happen sooner. Military decide. They basically repeat the argument 3 times, and somehow the military is going to inevitably develop a nanotechnology. We have a specific uniqueness argument. They don't have a warrant to this argument. We've given you a reason why Bayh-Dole actually means that universities are able to maintain those patents in the status quo. This was the inherency that Mitch talks about, and how they're able to actually maintain these things, which means other people can't get it. Our argument is that this is what allowed for the DoD to actually shy away. The second argument they've decreased, they've conceded. Our argument about how there's actually been a decrease in the amount that DoD is actually giving a crap about it. Our argument here is that the DoD specifically was going to cut it from the budget. The plan would uniquely be able to change this argument. We have 2 arguments. First is that you allow for baseline patents to happen, which means they would have to outsource these allowed patents in the status quo. Our argument here is pretty good. It indicates that this happened during the Manhattan Project, and was the government held a monopoly of patents in the status quo. Bayh-Dole didn't happen when Bayh-Dole did not exist during the Manhattan Project, which is what they did to monopolize the industry. This is important. Oh yeah, I missed your question. One.
So when the government had the actually never mind.
Okay, never mind. This is important because it's indicative of the way in which the perception of the environment would happen post the plan. If we reverted back to the scenario before the Manhattan, what it will lead to is the monopolization of this technology, similar to what happened with nuclear technology. It doesn't assume the action of the plan will be permitted. Moreover, the second generation technology argument is conceded. It indicates that only in the status quo is the DoD excluded from this process. They would then exclude the government. They say miscalculation wouldn't happen because it's too small. The H1N1 scenario I gave is pretty devastating. That's really small, but it would be able to happen. Moreover, they can modify it to make a resistance to other drugs, which is the reason why dispersal mechanisms will be really quick. They say creates vaccine, doesn't solve our scenario of first strike, which is one, they would be able to do things like make a resistance to that vaccine, but two, first strike means that the attack would occur before you are even able to plan for it. More, the fact that they've conceded our argument that the DoD would uniquely make it classified means it becomes more dangerous, and it's more likely for asymmetric warfare to happen in the future. Anything, Marky?
It's an overview. The case.
Yeah.
And it's patents disadd, safety disadd, and military disadvantage.
Yeah.
Judges? Whitman?
Yes.
SIU will win this debate for 3 reasons. One, we are simply ahead on the uniqueness question. R&D in nanotechnology is increasing massively as of right now, and that is coming through a trilateral commission. The plan shifts away from universities and guarantees only government infrastructure. We have read 4 disads on the case about why universities are better than the government. We will read those on solvency specifically, and that turns both of the advantages. That means the only thing left to evaluate is the risk of a disad. They don't have just offensive strategies on the disads. They're not straight turning, which means you defer to the patents disad independently. It says the United States would not be able to cooperate with Europe anymore. Europe, in a rogue state action, immediately has new types of securitization about their nanotechnology absent the United States, and that ensures the creation of unsafe nanotechnology and nanotechnology that creates an arms race scenario between the United States because the United States cannot monitor it. Additionally, they have turned themselves on the safety disad. We win because if it is true, the AF creates open source technology and non-state actors want our nanotechnology, you have given nanotech to the non-state actors. Additionally, case. First, I'd like you to drop down to our university critical arguments. These arguments are flagged under the ESO point. The universities are critical. The first argument is Bayh-Dole is actually increasing the funding for universities. They make an argument that universities are getting funding from the government specifically. Our argument is more specific on this question. The way that applied science is occurring in universities is because of new types of investment, i.e. selling off their licenses. That contributes to $1.85 billion of universities, specifically in applied sciences directives within the United States. Additionally, the concession of the governmental backlog is a game changer for SIU. It means that the government does not have the infrastructure to be able to deal with the rapid patent increase that are occurring in the status quo. Remember the uniqueness arguments. Patents have increased in the United States over almost 2,000 per year, which means that the government now has to create an entirely new agency to be able to deal with that. That does not exist in the status quo. Do not allow them to have some PMR voodoo about changing that type of agency. Additionally, they are conceding the argument that this means universities would switch away from nanotechnology and develop worse types of technology, which is why there is an arms race scenario perceived against the United States because we are miscalculative and not collaborating with international directives. That means that any impact of the affirmative is inevitable and only becomes comparatively ratified in the world, which baseline safety procedures are thrown out the window. The last argument I want is that they concede that the plan results in shifting research to a different field. If the universities say they are just developing a nanotechnology and have a patent for that, they would continue to develop a nanotechnology and call it something like, I don't know, synthetic biology, which is probably why it resolves the entirety of the AF patents. Uniqueness argument, not in favor of Whitman. Our argument says even if the United States is not cooperating in China, it proves our uniqueness, which means that the United States is only cooperating with Japan and the EU. That is a trilateral patent office, which means we don't care about China. The United States does not want to cooperate with China, probably because that means non-state actors would get access to our nano. That's your extinction level scenario. Additionally, they say the plan information would lead new types of information dissemination. That is the thesis of our link. Europe does not want the United States just going on about its patents and making them open source because Europe doesn't stand to make any money or have a security against other actors, which means that they would actually have an incentive to turn against the United States, develop unsafe nanotechnology, and use it against the United States eventually. Additionally, if they are right that Japan has open source, it proves that they prefer the United States not having open source because that's the only thing that allows them to make money on it. Additionally, we have already answered the rest of the arguments about why the House has talked about this and why the United States look like it's hoarding us right now. There is literally no warrant to these arguments. Additionally, safety. Look, their turn argument is devastating for Whitman. They win and they lose. Non-state actors want nano. They make nano open source. That means that it's asymmetric, it's used against the United States, and it leads to extinction. The AF doesn't even have an extinction scenario. They only say the death of millions of individuals. You'll vote for SIU alone on magnitude. Additionally, military. We have won the military JSAT and don't need it to win the entirety of the debate. The $1.8 billion that have been invested internationally becomes usurped by the DoD, and that means the public doesn't get access to widespread vaccines like AIDS.
Okay, cool. It'll be an overview, and you can put it where the other overviews have been. And then it will be kind of the case impact stuff. And then the solvency dump, the patents dised, safety dised, and the military dised. Right? Someone misread the Wikipedia argument. There's a difference between publicly owned and government owned. We are correct on the question of whether or not it's open source distribution or government control questions means that we control the entirety of the entirety of their link directions are backwards. All their arguments assume that the government just hoards all the patents. Our argument is that is what occurs in the status quo because it allows for funding of universities and then they get to maintain the patents. Our argument is that it means to open the Bayh-Dole Act actually is to open source patenting. The definition of publicly owned patents is not one that the government gets to hold and use things like the DoD or the other business inventors. It means that any business that pays taxes is technically considered public. Under that definition, means that they get to have massive innovation. Means we solve the entirety of our life or go to the Lyme Health Advantage. You can see sickle dehumanization means that multiple people or this corporation get to control the distribution of health medicine, and the status quo means try or die probably outweighs all your threat on scenarios about nuclear extinction. Also, the second advantage you've conceded. These things like global warming, all nuclear accidents go to these solvency up now. First, you make an argument says that you make the business and perceived spillover argument says because it leads to decrease in regulation. It's wrong. And the question of open source means that the plan obviously resolves this question. Even if that's not true, probably even if they're correct on the question of whether or not the government owns it or the public owns it, they're still wrong in the question of business perception because businesses don't have access to it in the world or in the status quo in the world of universities. Miranda's argument on the question of distribution highly more likely the business will be able to purchase from the government when there's no competition, as per their own arguments, as per a world in which Harvard and MIT have to compete against each other next, or they argue about the next, they make an argument the government will be worse because the government would have to be able to regulate it wrong. The DoD already regulates it now. We'll send that. The next argument they make is they go for the public-private terms.
I think this DoD argument is only that they control military extrapolation of nanotechnology. The use of that argument to say overall control has happened is definitely a new answer to our government backlog disad.
The second argument that Miranda, or on the military budget disad, or military development disad, the second argument that Miranda makes is that your argument that the DoD is this crazy secretive organization is indicative of the fact that they already have access to hoarding this tech in the status quo.
That's all we're saying.
He's not using this argument to answer the argument.
Yeah, exactly.
Right on. Okay.
It's different.
Right. Public records. You say the companies will pay because no longer university competition. Our argument is that university competition in status quo is precisely what means that there's no distribution of patents. You can look. They've conceived the thesis of the uniqueness scenarios in which all of their arguments is that there's increase in funding in the status quo, and increase in patents in the status quo is precisely our argument. It's only a question of distribution. They conceded that means that we control the direction of uniqueness. Means that we control the direction of how this argument functions. Next, the plan leads to patent grabbing. Patent grabbing release the perception of a wrong expression of open source. Also, patent grabbing, you don't have any unique argument because patent grabbing already happens in the status quo because of your competition between universities. Next it says the government bad argument. First of all, you said the score will be able to solve wrong. You can say the argument that we remove the government control because at least the free markets at least are open sourcing means that they have access to business no longer building blocks or the ones that are maintaining. Next you say that next you say the backlash just said that the government will control wrong. Actually, I've already answered this. I've already answered all this. Go to the patents to say. Extend Miranda's first argument, there's no cooperation in the status quo. You've conceded our brutal evidence says that the next war is going to be over patent wars. You just say that the United States is the only cooperation in the United States and Japan, but you concede our unique argument. There's no Japan cooperation in the status quo, indicative of the fact that Japan is 10 times cheaper than the fact that the United States is in the status quo. Next, argument is you extend Miranda's link to the plan leads to global info sharing because means this happens in both a world in which we're correct about the patent, which we're correct about open source, and also in the world of the government because government to government sharing is probably way more likely than university to university university share because if they're right about their arguments about the university being cooperative means that we control the internal link to resolving all the patents info next. They extend their race to the bottom market. All of our solvency evidence is about their H1B stuff is indicative of the advantage. You can cross-apply means that we've been able to resolve. Go to the safety decide now. They try to extend this shifty term says that means that not saying everyone will be able to use it wrong. Well, first of all, it's try or die for the disposable population of the status quo. They have no argument that you need the status quo will be able to solve for that. Also, the fact that the link turn will go for the DoD will have the response pages if it's sure that they will get patents means that they'll be able to respond do not say after the first strike in the first place means that they would respond to the United States. It wouldn't have to last global. I mean, you got no offenses to go. Last is the military development. Just had extend Miranda's first strike says the DoD is developing in the status quo. There's already 300 DoD patents that they have in the status quo as well as you can see they already have labs. You have made no response to this. Next, you send Miranda's no link arguments that the DoD is already doing the status quo. If you're true that we shouldn't trust the government, means we're true that already doing the status quo. You just extend your links, but you do not interact with the thesis of this at all. Also, Miranda's next argument that $1.8 million in public, so it's already tied up in the monopoly of the status quo. You no response to this. You also
budget for
also it's a question of budget. It's a question of budget, which means you don't have any answer. Next, you say that it cuts military budget. You say that Miranda's number 4 argument because conceded that the military budget is gutted in the status quo because of things like sequestration and stuff, which means they won't be able to do that. Also, the last argument that I want to extend is that there's medicine now, and the development of medicine is only, it's the last argument, the development of medicine is only in a world in which there's either A, government, or B, military, or B, civilian open source projects, not in a world of the status quo, which you can see all over the source.
Sorry.
Oh.
I know Mitch is.
Mitch is.